Which one of the following most accurately describes the relationship between the second paragraph and the final paragraph? Okay, I am going to go back here because I don't remember specifically what the second paragraph was about. The second paragraph starts, studies of fossilized pollen grains preserved in peats and lake muds provide an additional means of investigating vegetative landscape change. Okay, so the second paragraph is where we introduce the pollen analysis, right? I don't need to read the whole paragraph. The final paragraph starts out, it must be stressed, though, that there are limits to the ability of the pollen record to reflect the vegetative history. Okay, this last paragraph was where we said, hey, you can't always tell which species you're talking about when it comes to pollen analysis. So what's the relationship between the second paragraph and the last paragraph? Well, the second paragraph introduces, notice what I'm doing here. I'm coming up with an answer. I do this for every question, right? I'm coming up with the answer before I read the 5 answer choices, and then I go find the one that most closely matches what I'm predicting. Because when you understand the passage, you can do this, right? And we just looked at the second paragraph and the final paragraph, and I'm saying to myself, well, the second paragraph tells me or introduces pollen analysis. The final paragraph tells me a limitation of pollen analysis. So in that sense, it's elaborating. It's elaborating on some of the downsides to this new approach. Sound good? So let's take a look at these answers and see which one is closest. Okay, A, the second paragraph proposes a hypothesis for which the final paragraph offers a supporting example. If anything, the final paragraph tells us a problem, not a supporting example. So A is out. B, the final paragraph describes a problem, yeah, I think it does, that must be solved before the method advocated in the second paragraph can be considered viable. Okay, Parker, I think you asked about too strong before. This answer choice seems too strong to me. The last phrase, this problem has to be solved before the method can be considered viable. Viable means like usable. Yet the passage has already used it twice in 2 examples to get us new information. So it's clearly viable. It just has some minor drawbacks, right? So B is going too far by suggesting that we have to solve this problem or it can't be used. C, the final paragraph qualifies the claim made in the second paragraph. That's a pretty empty answer, but qualifies just means to clarify or to limit. Like if you qualify something, if you say, hey, I promise to weed your garden. You're like a super friendly person. You're like, I promise to weed your garden. And then you're like, but only on the weekends. Okay, what you just did is you qualified, you limited your promise, right? And qualifies comes up on the LSAT quite a bit. We say the final paragraph qualifies the claim made in the second paragraph? Yeah, it probably does, because the second paragraph says, hey, we got this cool thing. And the final paragraph is like, yeah, but you can't use it for species in some cases. That's qualifying. That's limiting its scope. So this sounds like a pretty good answer. There's nothing in here that's objectionable. D, the second paragraph describes a view against which the author intends to argue. I'm not going to read the rest of this because the author is giving us the final paragraph. This is the author's point, not something the author is going to argue against. E, the final paragraph offers procedures to supplement the method described in the second paragraph. What? No, it's just a limitation. It's like, here's how the method isn't perfect. The best answer here is C. Questions on this one? Okay, so question. In this instance, when you don't understand a word such as qualifies, but know all the other answers are incorrect, would you just pick C? Yes. There are 2 ways to get the right answer on the LSAT. One, you cross out the 4 wrong answers and pick what's left, or you pick the right answer, right? Or ideally, for a lot of these questions, you're doing both. You're like, yeah, I can see why that's correct, and I can see why the other ones are wrong. But sometimes people, they don't understand an answer choice. They're down to 2, and then they do understand one of the 2 answer choices. If you know that one of those 2 is wrong, then cross it out and pick the other one. You got this. And then, of course, after the test is over, figure it out. All right. Thank you. Any other questions on this one? How do you quickly get the broad strokes of the paragraph for questions like this and general organization RC questions? Oh, good questions. So I do what I just did here for you all. When I read this question and it was like, hey, second paragraph and final paragraph, I start reading that paragraph, and usually that's enough to remind me of what I already know because I read the passage well, right? It's like I started reading it and I was like, oh yeah, that's where they talked about this. I hope that was true for you all as I did that, right? As soon as I start reading that sentence, you're like, okay, that was the paragraph about the limitations or whatever. If that's good enough for you, then you can just stop as soon as you're halfway through that first sentence or whatever. If that's not enough for you, you might need to scan a little bit into the paragraph, but that should be good. Okay, on a similar note, when you aren't familiar with a word in a passage and the context does not hint at the meaning, what should you do? I would try to predict 2 or 3 possible interpretations of that word. Okay, so if you see a word you don't know and you can't figure it out from context, try to say, hey, it could mean this or it could mean that. And then as you continue reading the passage, oftentimes one of your predictions will become much more likely or possible or obvious. Cool.